except that, tragically, a large proportion of the human race has convinced itself over the centuries that death is not real, that the real me, the soul or spirit, somehow overrides death, survives death, even in some cases benefits from death, passing on to a higher existence. Here's Plato, the Greek thinker, about 400 BC. The soul, Greek psyche, the soul is in the likeness of the divine and immortal and rational and uniform and indissoluble and unchangeable. When death attacks a man, the mortal portion of him may be supposed to die, but the immortal retires at the approach of death and is preserved safe and indestructible.
In his book Eternal Hope, published in 1954, the outstanding Christian teacher Emil Brunner comments, "This solution to the problem of death stands in irreconcilable opposition to Christian thought."
The fact is that over the centuries, most Christians have been taught to believe it. Here's Emil Brunner in more detail. Widely spread among all peoples and at all times is the idea of a survival of the soul after death. That is, the view that death means the separation of soul from body. This view appears in many varied forms, from primitive animism to the philosophical doctrine of immortality. It assumes the form of the Indian teaching of karma, about the reincarnation of the soul in another light, in a state corresponding to its ethical worth. Again, it appears in the idea, first found in ancient Egypt, of an otherworldly judgment, in which some souls will be assigned to a joyful and radiant world, others to a dark, joyless, and tormented existence in the beyond. For the history of Western thought, the Platonic teaching of the immortality of the soul became of special significance. It penetrated so deeply into the thought of Western man because, although with certain modifications, it was assimilated by Christian theology and church teaching, was even declared by the Lateran Council of 1512 to be a dogma, to contradict which was a heresy, and likewise from Calvin onwards, it was assumed in post-Reformation Protestantism to be a part of Christian doctrine. This solution of the problem of death stands in irreconcilable opposition to Christian thought. One believes either in the immortality of the soul, or one believes in the God of revelation. Not my body dies, I die. The opinion that we men are immortal because our soul is of an indestructible, because divine essence, is once for all irreconcilable with the biblical view of God and man. But doesn't the Bible teach that human beings have within us an immortal soul or spirit? Absolutely not. God alone has immortality, says 1 Timothy 6 verse 16. Actually, the Old Testament, originally written in Hebrew and Aramaic, has no particular word for immortality at all. What the Old Testament does say is that the death of human beings and the death of animals is the same. Man cannot abide in his pomp, says Psalm 49. He is like the beasts that perish. We began this video by looking at the account of creation in Genesis chapter 1. It's time for us now to look at the continuation of that account in Genesis chapter 2, especially verse 7. The Lord God formed man of dust from the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. Genesis 2 verse 7, Revised Standard Version. First of all, notice that the word translated here, breath, in the Revised Standard Version, is one of the words commonly translated spirit in English translations of the Old Testament. The word is neshama. Notice also that the word translated here, being, in the Revised Standard Version, is a word commonly translated in the Old Testament and English translations, soul. The word is nephesh. Now frequently, since 200 AD at least, when Tertullian, the Christian scholar, wrote, frequently this text has been interpreted to mean that at creation God formed man's body of dust, but that he put within man an immortal personal essence, a soul or spirit, perhaps something of his own being even. Is this really what Genesis chapter 2 verse 7 means? Obviously not. This is a misunderstanding born of preconceptions, as biblical scholars now often acknowledge. First of all, what this foundational text actually says is that man, not man's body, but man, Hebrew Adam, human being, was formed by God of dust from the ground. Hebrew Adamah. Now actually the same thing is said of the animals in Genesis 2 verse 19, where we are told, out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air. Psalm 103 verse 14 says, we are dust. And you can look at Genesis 3 verse 19, Genesis 18 verse 7, Job 10 verse 9, and Ecclesiastes 3 verse 20 for the same teaching. Genesis 2 verse 27 tells us that God put into man's nostrils the breath, neshama, of life. Is this something which other animals do not possess? Is this perhaps a never-dying personal essence, a spirit, which human beings alone have? Not at all. Again, this is something which human beings and animals have in common. Genesis 7 verses 21 and 22 tells us that at the time of Noah's flood, all flesh died. Everything that moved upon the earth, birds, cattle, beasts, all swarming things, and every man. Everything, says Genesis 7, in whose nostrils was the breath, neshama, or spirit, ruach, of life. Notice that in Genesis 7 verse 22, along with the word neshama, the much more common word for spirit, ruach, is used. Elsewhere also, both words are used together. Check out these verses for yourself. Isaiah 42 verse 5, Job 27 verse 3, Job 33 verse 4. Now ruach is the Hebrew word most commonly translated spirit in English versions of the Old Testament. Sometimes certainly it does mean your personal self, the human personality, but never, never is it said to be immortal. And the point is that in this context, in connection with human dying and living, it is always used in the same sense as neshama. And what is that sense? It certainly cannot mean an immortal personal essence of man. No, what it means is life principle, power to live, life. As Raymond Brown, professor of biblical studies at Union Theological Seminary in Woodstock College, New York, explains, today one of the simplest tests of life is to see whether a person is still breathing. So also for the ancient Hebrew, the breath or spirit was the principle of life.